So therefore, price performance measures become more important for a differentiated strategic focused firm, and also growth performance metrics are important and not so much on the productivity. So we have productivity and growth being a focus of chipset, which is focusing on cost leadership. We have price and growth being a focus on a differentiated company, a product differentiated company following differentiated strategy. So there we have the four parts of today's lecture. What is a strategy? Why do firms choose a certain strategy? We look at the generic types: cost, differentiation, and product focus. Then we look in more detail, how do you manage a particular strategy? And we introduce chipset as our example. We introduce the concept of the balanced scorecard that is widely used in organisations around the world. We use the SMS, an acronym, to define the balanced scorecard, that is strategy, measurement. And there you go. We can put this up on the internet, and just, you know, so much of what we're trying to teach you is lost if you don't have an overarching framework. And that's really why I just want to re-emphasise in the second half of this semester. We're spending so much time on, let me just find where I am, we're spending so much time on calculations. How many of you think you're doing lots of calculations? Can we have a show of hands? Yeah, lots of. So where does it all fit in? So today is a chance to make some of that fit in. And so as I get my PowerPoint slides up here, we can actually start to execute on where it fits in. We're starting at week 8 on the PowerPoint slide. That's all we need to know. Where does it all fit in? It's very important to think about that. Why? Because for the exam, I can do many things. So we can actually examine some of the things I talk about in today's lecture that's not in the textbook. And if I give examples, I can use that as I've done in the past. What you have in front of you is your learning objectives. The learning objective. We don't want to focus on all of them. I want you to take away probably the first 5. I think there's 6 or 7. The last 2 you can read up on and work on. I want you to get some good understanding of the main 4 areas. What are the 4 areas? It's about strategy. Okay, it's about choice of strategy. It's about balanced scorecard and the financial performance measurement emphasis. If we look at the strategy, this is the one thing we want to cover today. Why do companies choose a certain strategy? We want to cover once they've chosen a certain strategy, what is the type of measures, or how can they execute on strategy? There are so many managers and leaders in companies that are leading, they're doing a lot of talking, but they're not executing. Execution is so important, and very few people know how to execute. You need operational knowledge to execute, as well as EQ knowledge to execute. Operational knowledge, we'll talk about that number 2. Number 3, I'll reintroduce to you the balanced scorecard. And number 4, we are going to give you a more in-depth look at the financial measures of the balanced scorecard. So why is that important? Because so far we've spoken so much about the number 4, the financial measures. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's what we're covering today. Let me repeat. Number 1 is the strategy, why firms choose a certain strategy. Number 2, given a certain strategy, is there some way you can manage that strategy and execute? Number 3, the balanced scorecard. You see, balanced scorecard doesn't come first. The balanced scorecard comes after the strategy. Okay, strategy first. Balanced scorecard is a way of giving visibility about execution of the strategy. Finally, I'll give an example of just one part of the scorecard, that is financial performance measures. What are the other 3 parts of the scorecard? Learning and growth. And customer perspective. And hello? internal measures, operations, okay? Like what happens on the factory floor, delivery measures. Any measures associated with things you see in the organisation, activities you see, activity measures, activity-based measures, okay? Remember the activity-based management framework we talked about in week 3? Okay, think of that. Anything to do with that, that's internal. Learning and growth, now you're talking about future training, development, developing capabilities for the future. Right, so today we're not going to talk about custom, we're not going to talk about the activities, we're not going to talk about learning and growth in detail. We're going to talk about financial in detail as at the end of today. So it can get very complicated a little bit because lots of variances again, but we'll try and simplify it for you. The purpose of the lecture is to simplify it so you can understand it in the big picture. Is there everyone happy with that? That's where we're going, so let's move on. There's a lot of PowerPoint slides here. I will tell you which ones to circle and focus on. All right, so you've got 50 or 60 slides. Not all of them are equal. You understand? I like to throw in more to confuse you directly. Okay? So I'm deliberately doing what a good teacher should not do. Okay? Good teacher and presenter should just have 10 slides. Put your hand up if you'd like to just have 10 slides. Yeah, everyone put, okay, I always give you more, right? Okay, for free. So let's have a quick, you know where we are here? We are over here. So you're nearly finished. You should be very happy. Okay, you've seen this before, yes? No? Great. The only reason why I just show it to you to remind you that this is a way of executing the balanced scorecard. All right? It's not like, oh, that was in week 3. We remember it for week 3 only. We don't have to worry about it for any other week. No. We're coming back to that because it's a way that we can execute a cost leadership strategy. If you're doing cost leadership strategy, you're going to focus a lot on this because you're trying to drive down costs down here. You're trying to reduce costs here, you see? So therefore, what you learned in the past becomes important for executing one part of the balanced scorecard, one part of a firm strategy. Okay, let's just... You don't have to memorise this for the exam. Okay, that's a big picture thing. When you come back and do the MBA one day, you can have a look at that and come and talk to me and I'll tell you about how it all fits together. Okay, so aspiring MBA students, this is for you. This is for you. Now, what does it mean? We are looking at the accounting aspect of the balanced scorecard today. In week 4, week 3, remember I had a phone call with Grace? Okay, we did talk about the customer aspect, right? And next week, we're going to look at total quality management, total quality control. We're going to look at the internal. So you see, we're bringing a lot of weeks together now. So keep that in mind. Don't get confused. This is on its own. So today, we're looking at strategy, system thinking, and measurement. That is the scorecard, SMS. And you've all played the game, so now you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to go into too much detail, but I will refer to it where I can. I've given you the learning objectives summary. Here is the next important slide to circle. Please circle this slide, number 10, learning objective 1. Please circle that now. Okay, like I said, not every slide. We're going to skip over a lot of slides and I'll tell you which ones to focus on. Those of you who are not in this lecture, you won't know. But you're here, so then I give you the puzzle. I give you the code. Okay? You can call it the exam code. Okay? I only give the exam code in the lecture. And the exam code is focus on those slides I asked you to circle. All right? What do we mean by success? Firms choose success. They do choose. They don't just fall on success. Some firms choose to compete on cost. Some firms choose to compete on quality. What do we mean by success? Well, how many of you know what this is? Hands up if you know this company, HTC. Originally, they were not a brand name company. Like now they've got product differentiation strategy. But originally they were OEM, they were a manufacturer for O2 in London. This is going back 10 years ago. Long time. They were making the iPad for HP. You know, the touch screen gizmos that came out 2002, 2001, 2003, they were made by HTC. Around 2006, HTC decided we're going to change strategy from cost leadership, which is really what you're focusing on then, to developing a brand name, developing a differentiated product. So companies can change strategy all the time. And you know that in the game, you had to change the strategy from supplying the ease of use or the high power. Which one were you doing first? High power. Then you had to change strategy to ease of use. What caused you to change strategy?
Saturation of the market.
Yeah, the market changed. And so then change strategy. Fine. So now you know what we mean by strategy. High power was product differentiation. Ease of use was cost leadership. Which one did you have a higher price on? The high power. Low price, cost leadership. Which price did you refer to when you did cost leadership? Same as your competitors. Okay, for high power you can charge as much as you like. We'll come back to that later on today. All right, so here's some successful firms. Do you all know PQI? You know PQI now. Why? Because I've handed out the case study and used PQI. So those work on that case study. Very interesting case and very interesting company. They compete with SanDisk. They compete with Kingston, one of the major manufacturers of the chips that go into USBs around the world, or the USBs, they got their own design to go into the USBs. With cloud computing, we don't know how much longer that will occur. All right, there's other successful firms. Skip through your slides now and I'll take you to the next most important one. And Pima, you're looking up PQI, are you on the internet? Close. All right, so here is something, aspiring MBA students. Have a look at that. Okay, because I teach that in the MBA, in applying the balanced scorecard, executing the balanced scorecard. That is a big picture framework. You're not examining on that, so we're going to pass on that. But I just want to show you some executional frameworks that I use in my corporate training. Okay. Back to what is the basis for success. We understand it's the way you compete. Basis competition, where you compete and who you compete against. That partly decides whether you're competing based on cost leadership or product differentiation. And I've given you some successful firms. Let's move to, and I take MBA students through this framework. So some of these slides are slides I work through in corporate training, in the MBA training. We've got 3 strategies I want you to take away. Circle this slide, please. Circle this slide. Product differentiation and cost leadership. You're all aware of that, and you're probably aware of firms that are product differentiated. Apple, HTC, a lot of the firms in the smartphone market are trying to differentiate themselves, but it's very hard because there's basically 2 major platforms. There's the Apple platform ecosystem, and then there's the Android. Okay, there's not much you can do but just provide a handset with longer battery power. It's lighter and more durable in case you drop it. There's not many other features you can compete on. Okay, so it's very, very high competitive. But in the camera market, wow, look at this. Look at this new price. This is a 3rd strategy. Focusing strategy. So you may come up with a waterproof camera. How many of you have got a waterproof camera now? Put your hand up if you have bought a camera in the last 10 years. Put your hand up if you have purchased 2 cameras in the last 10 years. 3 cameras. Why do you keep buying more cameras?
Because they get better.
A picture is a picture. How do they get better?
You've got different functions.
Okay, so functionality. Sometimes you may buy 2 cameras because they're in a different price point. You might buy a 2nd camera because it's waterproof, not because it's better on other functions on your first camera. So you have 2 cameras now. Okay, and those of you in courting, we see a lot of couples around Hong Kong carrying these dirty great big cameras. Why? Because the other partner of the couple wants to have lots of lovely photos. Okay, how many of you have got a nice camera like in this range here? Anyone? Okay, yeah, that was just a little hand there. I understand, I saw that. Okay, so, and there's your different price points of cameras. So you know what we mean. We're talking about focusing strategy, all right? So you understand, and I've already shown you that picture before. Okay, so now here is an example from an analyst report of the various players in the mobile phone market. And this is a bit dated. I think this is over 12 months old, and it's talking about Nokia as the leader in the low end of smartphones. In many ways it is, but in many ways it isn't, because it's MediaTek and the Shanzai market across the border in China, which is the leader in low-end mobile phones. We're talking about 300, 400 million units per year being sold in India and Africa and China, and they're not Nokia phones, okay? But in the Western developed world, yes, Nokia is the leader in the low end now. But look at the different price points. Again, there's a real example of the price points, and you can see Apple is dominating the plus 500 price point, whereas HTC, it's not so high, but definitely dominating in a lower end price point. And then you have RIM and Nokia a little bit further down. Of course, RIM has actually lost a lot of pricing power, and that changes over time as competition changes, as the market changes, and the preferences of the market for different features change. Okay? So it's possible to have an exam question like this and ask you to tell me about what the different strategies are of the different players. What I do want to examine you on is what I want you to circle next. That is the example of chipset. Chipset makes, guess what? ICs. Wow, exciting. Those of you who come to the expo, you'll know how excited I am about the electronics. So you know there's expos coming up end of this month and in April. This is one thing you need to circle. You need to circle this. This is a key idea you need to take away. This is a very simplified version of the quality function deployment framework. Let me repeat. This is a simplified version of the quality, Q for quality, F for function, deployment, D, QFD framework. Have a look at that. If you want to go into more detail in this, in the operations literature, you'll find more details on that, quality function deployment. This is a simplified version. So you need to understand how a differentiated company may look differently from a cost leadership company. So let's have a look at chipset. Chipset has a high rating on price, scalability, service, but very low on design and power and speed compared to its competitor. You with me? So how will we characterize chipset based on that? Cost leadership or product differentiator? Hands up for cost leadership. Hands up for product differentiator. Okay, you got the idea. Okay, you need to be able to, by looking at the QFD diagram, you need to be able to know if a company is a cost leader or a differentiator. Okay, you need to be able to know that. Okay, please circle that in your PowerPoint slide. Pima?
When you say price, do you mean low price, or like when you say price is given a high rating, does that mean they're cheaper?
It means, it's a rating for why you buy products from chipset. You're always going to rate that higher when their price is better. Okay? Okay? So when we talk about attribute rating, why customers purchase your product. So it looks a bit double Dutch, it's very high on price. No. Customers come to you because you have a better price. Yes?
When it says better price, do you mean it's worth the price, or the price is low?
Value for money, but generally that in part that says it's lower price too. Okay, yes. Because other attributes are separated. So it's not just a final one aggregate value for money proposition. Okay, the price is sort of separate. So in this graph, you would see price as separate. So price is the number one reason on its own for why customers come. Any questions from the back? No? Okay.
How do you measure it though? How do you measure it? Is it by survey?
That's a very good question. How do you get this data? How do you actually get this? Do you just make it up? Do management make it up? No, they can ask their customers. They can do focus groups. They can employ consultants like me to do survey of customers and then get feedback. They can do industry reports where independent consultants will actually survey customers and give feedback exactly like the following. Let me show you. Exactly like that. And so an independent group will go out and talk to customers about where these products are positioned, but also get information about where customers view, how do they perceive all of those products in that marketplace. Okay, so if you want more information or a report, I can provide that to you. Yes?
Go back to that slide.
Yes.
So can this sort of information be used by companies that are about to start to maybe see where it would be easier to enter the market?
Oh, absolutely. You would be crazy if you don't. You'll be crazy if you don't. And I have a recording of a talk given by one of those people at the Trade Expo, and he's talking about all the different price points of the tablets. And he comes to the expo every year. If you come to the Hong Kong one in April, you can actually go and watch him. And he will talk about all this information. The latest price points, if you want to price it, if you want to have a tablet of this size and this attribute, then you must sell it between 200 and 300 US or even less. And so he talks about the latest trends, price points versus the attributes of the products. Exactly. There's so much you can learn by going to these trade expos. They're not just exhibitors, they actually have seminars where consultants come and talk about all these things. So I would recommend if you want to go into a market, you need to go to Trade Expo, you need to go talk to consultants, experts in that area who have done the market research in that market space. So very good question. Any more questions at the back? Okay, so let me remind you, you have lots of slides. Circle the ones that are most critical, okay, and that's the one we're now going to focus on the example of chipset, okay, and so anytime you have a question, please don't hesitate to ask, okay. So here's chipset, and we've simplified the quality function deployment system. If you want an article that has a bit more detail, I can provide that to you, okay. We've simplified it. There can be many more attributes than this. All right, here is an example. Someone asked the question, where do you get this information from? Do you get from focus group, things like that? Here is an example of the information coming from a consulting research firm. And so here is the Credit Suisse scorecard ratings for the top smartphone vendors. And basically on all of these attributes and the weighting and how each of these players rank on these attributes. So I could give you this graph here and ask you to graph it just like chipset. I could ask you to graph 3 of them, and I did that in the exam 2 years ago. Okay, why would you want to do that? Because it's impossible for one company to compete on every attribute. And companies need to be smart about which attributes in their product they are very good at, that customers buy their product, and to maybe de-emphasize the attributes that they're not good at, and just be aware of that. Just know their customer segment and not try and sell to the whole market. So you look at, for example, Motorola is very good at distribution and supply chain. Apple is very good at the software and the brand. You see that? Nokia, very good on the brand, but not very good on the software. How many of you have purchased a Nokia phone in the last 10 years? Okay, how many of you expect to purchase a Nokia phone in the next 5 years? No one. Why? Why did you buy it in the last 10 years? Because of the software or the brand? Yeah, but more the brand. You know, software has moved along a bit. Maybe the Nokia software hasn't got worse. It may have been the best in the market 10 years ago, but today it's not the best because other softwares have moved along. Okay, the Android and the Apple software have moved. So competitors can change your strategic positioning. Okay, so there's a real, have you got this in your PowerPoint slide? Great. If you want more detail on that, happy to send that to you. But that is where the information comes from when you're trying to find out where your product position in the market. There are always lots of industry reports like this. You have to pay for them, of course. Okay. All right. How many of you are presenting in 2 weeks' time? Okay. And you're presenting on PQI? No one? Not yet? If you're doing PQI, I have some beautiful PowerPoint slides like this, all ready for you to work on your presentation. And basically this is an assessment of the suppliers of PQI based on all of these attributes. More about that later. Let's move on to the second part of today's lecture. Remember, there's 4 areas. What is your strategy? Given that Chipset has a particular strategy, and we have identified that strategy as cost leadership. So now, how does it execute strategy? Okay, number 1, what is strategy? Number 2, how do we execute strategy? We're over here. And it really comes under learning outcome number 2. How do we execute? Well, under cost leadership, we can go back to the activity-based costing model and look at the process value analysis, design analysis, functional analysis. Specifically function, design, and the process value analysis. For the design, you can design in cheaper modules. It doesn't mean you have to, just because you have cost leadership strategy, it doesn't mean you don't do design analysis. You can design products to be simple, modular, so you can outsource all the manufacturing and then just leverage the scale of product you want to make. And you make more, then the cost per unit can be less. Okay, so those 3 ideas are good ways of helping to execute a low-cost strategy, and that's why we've got in here value engineering, process engineering comes in directly from week 2, week 3, and that's how Chipset can build internal capabilities to support its cost leadership. So class, the big challenge that everyone has in today's world is how do you execute strategy? I don't think any of you would have trouble in saying, oh, this is cost leadership, this is differentiated. But many people, even MBAs, managers, leaders, have trouble working out, okay, we're cost leader, what do we do? How do we execute? How do we become the best cost leader? Okay, that is very hard. So some of the tools you can use for becoming the best cost leader are value engineering, process engineering. Why? It helps build internal capabilities to support your cost leadership. Okay? It helps you to manage the capabilities, and then you can implement that leadership. Of course, you're going to build in a balanced scorecard with measures to support that cost leadership strategy. But don't forget what you learnt in week 2 and week 3. Are you with me on that? Week 2 and 3 are in here, helping to support cost leadership strategy. That is the execution that a lot of people have trouble working with. Now circle this here. This is learning objective 2. They're referring to re-engineering, redesigning business processes. Basically what we are referring to is what we taught you in week 2 and 3. Okay? Design analysis, functional analysis, process value analysis. They are the first things you go to in trying to manage costs. The final thing you go to is a radical re-engineering. Okay. So circle learning objective 2. And here's another way of how a real example of re-engineering your manufacturing process or re-engineering the order delivery process can help support the cost leadership strategy, and therefore you've got the balanced scorecard at the end. What we're going to next is the balanced scorecard. But the big point